Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Solvable Mysteries podcast. My name is Juras. I'm joined once more by Glenn Highcove. How are you feeling, man?
Hello. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. It's funny because this time of year, everybody around me is like sneezing all over the place. My kid just had a head cold, but not the Rona. And I know, like we said last week, you were getting off. You and your whole family were getting off of a tough spell um, of
Yeah.
being sick. So you don't really hurt. I hope you're doing okay this week and feeling better.
Oh, yeah.
And up and going. I'm really interested to hear. I'm glad your voice is up and going this week, and that you're feeling better because in this case, today, I'll tease that when I was listening to it, a lot of the little details on this one were real eye openers, and they also kind of let's say stimulated some thoughts about like maybe some insights into some of what was going on. But it was really interesting to hear all the little details and theories on this one. This one's got, I think, maybe a little extra variety. But I'll stop teasing it and let you get right to the topic.
Yeah. This week we're going to be talking about the Brandon Swanson's disappearance. Have to make sure we don't mess it up with the Brandon Lawson's disappearance, which was a very similar case in many aspects, including the victim's name and like the way that both men disappeared. But the Brandon Swanson's case is a little bit different, and I've been paying a lot of attention to this case last night, especially on the maps. Was trying to make sense of it. I think I have a pretty good picture in my head now. Before we go into the details of this case, I want to quickly read out the introduction, and afterwards, let's just get into it. So, Brandon Swanson is an American man who disappeared on May 14th, 2008, after he drove his car into a ditch while on his way home from celebrating the end of the spring semester. At the time of his disappearance, Brandon was 19 years of age. He is a white male. He had brown hair and blue eyes. He was around 5'6" in height and weighed around 120 pounds. Both of his ears are pierced. Brandon is from a small town called Marshall in southwestern Minnesota. He had graduated from high school in 2007. Afterwards, he chose to study wind turbines for a year at the Minnesota West Community and Technical College campus in the small town of Canby, located approximately 30 miles away from his hometown of Marshall. Once the classes for the academic year had ended on May 13th, 2008, Brandon decided to stay in the town of Canby for an evening of celebration with friends. Now, during the evening, Brandon attended two different parties. His friends saw him consume some alcoholic beverages. However, they also said that it was not enough to make him seem visibly intoxicated. After Brandon was done partying with his friends, he left Canby and decided to drive home before midnight. Unfortunately, at around 1:15 a.m. at night, Brandon drove his Chevrolet Lumina into a ditch from which he could not remove the car. Afterwards, Brandon tried calling a few of his friends, but no one really picked up. So at 2 a.m. that night, Brandon called his parents and told them what had happened. He also informed his parents that he wasn't hurt and asked if they could come and pick him up. Brandon's parents, Annette and Brian Swanson, got into their pickup truck and drove towards where they thought Brandon was. Brandon and his parents stayed on the phone call for around 47 minutes in total as the parents tried to make their way towards Brandon. Occasional hangups and drop offs from the call did occur, but for the most part, Brandon was there on the call trying to explain to his parents where he was at. As Brandon's parents were driving, Brandon tried to signal them by flashing his car's lights on and off. However, they could not spot Brandon. After a while, Brandon gave up and told his parents that he was leaving the car to walk towards the lights in the distance. He assumed the lights were coming from a nearby town called Lind, which was a small town just 7 miles southwest from his hometown of Marshall. Brandon told his father, Brian, to drive to the parking lot of a local bar in Lind and wait for him there. Brian began driving to that parking lot while still on the phone with his son Brandon. However, shortly after 2:30 a.m. that night, which was around 47 minutes into their phone call, Brandon suddenly interrupted himself on the phone and shouted out, "Oh shit." He was silent for the remainder of the call until his parents hung up and attempted to call him back. Brandon has not been seen or heard from since. Now, the next morning at 6:30 a.m. the morning, Brandon's parents reported him missing to the Lind police. At first, law enforcement were hesitant to start looking for Brandon, but eventually, later on that same morning, they did begin the search for him. To better focus the search, the sheriff's office obtained Brandon's cell phone records, which revealed that Brandon had been calling from the vicinity of a small town of Taunton, which is located right in between Canby and Marshall. This meant that Brandon was unaware of where he actually was during the night, as Taunton is approximately 20 miles away from Lind. After searching the area, deputies discovered Brandon's abandoned car in a ditch of a gravel road within Lincoln County, Minnesota. The discovery of Brandon's car brought the Lincoln County Sheriff, Jack Wizitsky, into the investigation as well. He told the media that Brandon's car had gotten hung up on the top of an incline at the edge of the road. The damage was not serious, however, it was enough to keep the wheels from touching the ground on the side. Because the area was surrounded by grass and gravel, there was no tracks left at the scene. This meant that there was no way to tell which direction Brandon might have started walking during the night. Brandon's call had been routed through a tower at the intersection of County Routes 3 and 10 near another small town called Minneota. By May 15th, the call had been determined to have came from within 5 miles of that tower in Minneota. Law enforcement noted that within the area where Brandon went missing from, a red light atop a Taunton grain elevator could be seen. Law enforcement also believes there's a chance that Brandon saw this red light and believed that the town of Lind was within walking distance. Ground searches alongside with flyovers of the area have been conducted. Search dogs were also brought in. They picked up a 3-mile trail that largely followed the field roads west-northwest to an abandoned farm, then along the Yellow Medicine River to a point where it appeared to enter the waterway. On the phone call with his parents, Brandon also mentioned passing fences and hearing nearby water. These details led to a theory that Brandon might have drowned. Search boats were deployed along the Yellow Medicine River, and also gates were installed. In some areas within Lincoln County, the water had been 10 feet deep on the morning of Brandon's disappearance, but had gone significantly down since then. Deputies also walked the river's bank. Horses as well as all-terrain vehicles were deployed in the surrounding area, but no trace of Brandon was ever found. Authorities ruled out a more organized and extensive ground search. After the original search found no sign of Brandon, most efforts were discontinued. However, Sheriff Jack Wizitsky continued to walk the 2-mile of the Yellow Medicine riverbank in that area every day for the next 30 days. Searches resumed late that fall after the fields surrounding that area were harvested. Dogs on those searches continued to follow scents of human remains into the area northwest of Porter that had not been searched earlier. Search efforts picked up again in the spring after the snow had melted. By that time, around 122 square miles had been searched. In 2010, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension took over as lead agency on this case as well. This agency had set up a tip line, and by 2015, 7 years after Brandon's disappearance, only 90 leads had been reported to that tip line. By that point, when official searches resumed, the area of interest had moved towards Mud Creek, which is a tributary waterway of the Yellow Medicine River north of where the car was found. There are a few theories that come up in the disappearance of Brandon Swanson. One of the most popular theories suggests that Brandon had drowned in the Yellow Medicine River. During the search, one of the search dogs had followed a trail towards the river. However, after following the scent to the river, the dog continued up across on the other side of the river and onto a gravel road where it continued tracking the scent away from the water towards the Yellow Medicine County line. However, the trail eventually ended there. Brandon's mother, Annette, does not believe her son is in the river. She told the media, quote, "There really is nothing to indicate that he's in the river," end quote. Brandon's father, Brian, also does not believe that his son had drowned. He stated that Brandon did not seem disoriented or confused during their phone conversation during the night of his disappearance. Other theories are less popular. They range from intentional disappearance, foul play, mental breakdown, as well as a hit-and-run accident. Lincoln County Sheriff Jack Vizitsky stated he could not fully rule out a possible abduction in this case as well. He told the media, quote, "Someone could have been in the shadows, and they got him that way," end quote. At the time of this recording, Brandon has been missing for more than 13 years. So that's pretty much the introduction into the case. As always, man, do you have any initial ideas and anything jumping out to you?
Yeah, I think one of the things that was interesting to me about this case was, like you said, it was eerily similar to Brandon Lawson, albeit it happened much further away. It is interesting though that at least I think from the shows that I'd looked at, and I think this is also in some of the details you covered. Brandon is on this VICAP list, right? So there's this list of people that are potentially linked to, let's say, violent criminal actors, and his name is on the list. Um, it's interesting because that isn't necessarily the case for a lot of the other missing people um, that we've looked at over the past couple of years now. Yet for a case that seems to have not a lot of physical evidence, um, I don't know if I'm reading too much into it,
I
but yeah,
just real quickly, I had no idea he was on that list.
yeah. So this is maybe it's worth just having the discussion right now. So yeah, it's interesting. Apparently, there was some whole law. I guess he his disappearance, I think, stimulated some sort of law. And I feel a little bit bad now that I did not dig deeper into that. So maybe literally while we're doing the show, I might dig a little bit deeper into that detail just to come back to that. But yeah, when I looked at this, it was interesting because it's a list that I believe of people that are disappeared or murdered. So missing people, murder and or murdered people, and the idea was that the people on this list are somehow associated with like, let's say, violent crime. And it's kind of interesting because given some of the details that I just roughly heard, and then I'm going to try to flesh out as we keep going today, it kind of almost sounded like it might have been a bit political. I mean, I'll just throw that out there. And do you know what I mean by that? By it being political?
Um,
Like, Yeah.
The only thing I know about like politics in this case is that apparently some
Yeah.
sort of person from House of Representatives passed a law called Brandon's Law, and I did look into it a little bit. It apparently has something to do with when someone reports a missing person, not just a child, that law enforcement should act upon it immediately, because when Brandon Lawson was reported missing to law enforcement, eventually the Lind police, they even told, I believe, Annette, Brandon's mother, that Brandon had the right to be missing, which kind of tipped her off the wrong way, rubbed her off the wrong way, and
Yeah.
later on they kind of passed the law that I think law enforcement in this county now have to act upon a missing person's request immediately. I believe that was the case.
Perfect. So okay, that's I think, and that looks like that fits. Well, A, that I think directly answers my question, and B, yeah, it makes me wonder if getting his name on that VICAP list is something that. So the whole idea is they make this law because everybody kind of feels guilty, and that maybe something wasn't done early enough, and then maybe getting the name on the list is a way of sort of demonstrating extra attention, even when maybe the facts don't fit. Um, the theory, the violent crime theory. That I guess we'll flesh that out today. But my initial thoughts are it was kind of interesting to read that part, because that's what actually piqued a lot of people's attention. When I look at other shows and do research on this, that's kind of one of those big questions. Is gosh, a lot the initial investigation said accidental, like you said, an accidental drowning or maybe an exposure death, and then all of a sudden they're sort of switching gears and there's this legislation, and it's different, right, than what we've seen from a lot of these other cases. Even ones like was it last week with the Trail of Tears, or was that the previous week? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, last week, Trail of Tears. It
Okay.
was Madison Scott, right?
Yeah.
Madison Scott
Or,
case.
or,
Yeah.
or sorry, I should say Highway of Tears. I apologize. I apologize to the Native Americans. The Trail of Tears is actually something entirely different. So
Yeah.
apologies for mixing that up. Yep. Yeah. So anyways, to clarify that, yeah, it's interesting because the Highway of Tears is something that presumably has a higher amount of evidence of some kind of phenomenon going on. Anyway, yeah, just it was interesting to read that part specifically. Now, um, I couldn't help but kind of be able to relate to this a little bit, right? So I mean, probably a lot of people can relate to young people getting through their first year of college. You know what I mean? I mean, how did you feel at the end of like your first year of let's see.
For
Yeah.
we have like a different structure here in Eastern Europe.
Okay.
Like the one that I went was like a complete joke. I didn't even go to class or anything like that. I don't even know anyone from there. I was literally just playing CS:GO all day, so I didn't really do much. But in America, I know it's like different. You know what I mean?
Well, I think it's fair to say my senior year of UCLA, I also played a lot of Quake. So I mean that part's not so unusual. But yeah, I remember my first year of community college, um, getting to the end of it, and like for some reason it had just been like kind of an obnoxious semester. I had like this really awful class I really didn't like, and I had to like a written final and all this stuff. And I remember when it was all over, like I can definitely relate to this young man and his friends wanting to go out and blow off some steam. Yeah, it's it's interesting though. I mean, tell me in Lithuania, what's the drinking age limit there?
It used to be 18. Now it's 20.
Oh wow, okay, so they moved it up. Um, as far as I know, across the U.S., it's universally 21. And it's been like that for a long time. I think probably since like the 80s, maybe the mid 80s. So it is worth pointing out that you know, and I'm just gonna say this right now. I am not gonna make this show one of like I have in the past sometimes, one of those finger wagging, you know, alcohol is bad kind of episodes. I'm not going to do that. It's not about that at all. There are risks associated with alcohol use, and there's some legal things that I think we would be probably it would be responsible of us, or we would be promoting responsibility, I'd say, and prudence by maybe calling out when something wasn't the greatest idea, and you know how things resulted from that. But yeah, I mean, that being said, I definitely could. I don't know why, but I sort of remembered what a crappy time freshman year of college was. Also, the college he went to sounds kind of cool. It sounds like it's basically a trade college, um, right? Because he's going to go study something very
Yeah.
specifically technical. Um, you know, maybe he wasn't having to take a lot of extra electives and stuff. Maybe it was all business about wind turbines.
Yeah,
Anyway,
wind turbines.
yeah.
I did look into his background a little bit more. Apparently, he was a pretty smart person. I think he had future ambitions of continuing studies in some sort of a different university, and he was still going to do engineering. So I think this wind turbine study program was only for 1 year, and afterwards, I think his plan was to go to a different university. Obviously, that never panned out for Brandon.
Yeah, that's tragic for sure. I mean, it's interesting to think about. Like, maybe that is the smart way to go. Is if you're interested in something, before going down the whole program to become an engineer, like, why not just spend a year in intense, I guess, being immersed in the topic. I don't know. It kind of makes me wish I could do some parts of my life over when I hear of the options people have now. Anyway, regardless, what were your initial thoughts after you kind of got the lay of the land from, your
Yeah, well,
research?
the thing that jumps out, and pardon me, the nose is still a little bit clogged, but it wasn't COVID, guys. Don't worry about it. It was actually probably something way more serious than COVID. In retrospect, I wish I had COVID, because I was really messed up for the entire week. Now, jumping back to the case, right, and to answer your question, what really stood out to me in this case is, well, when you read the outline of this case without looking at the map, you will not, I think, understand the full picture. For me, what jumped out the most is when I looked at the map, and the map does not make any sense. So, dude, I want to quickly, and you could also look, because I'm not sure if you did a map investigation on your own. So, real quickly, I've been teasing this map on the show for quite a while now. I'm just gonna quickly note down the interesting details here, right? So, this is Marshall. This is the town where Brandon grew up, right, and where he was living at. This is Canby, approximately 30 miles, northwest of Marshall, where he was studying wind turbines, right? This is his car. And uh, I'm not sure, I will zoom into the map shortly, but if you can see, man, his car was not found on the main highway. It was found somewhere on a dirt road, and we'll jump into it shortly. So, and the very strange part for me is that, you see, this is the town of Lind. So, Brandon was making his way down from Canby, from this town to Marshall. And at some point during the night, he assumed he was in Lind. Now, I don't know how you assume you're close to Lind when you're having to drive from Canby to Marshall. It doesn't make any sense. Now, if I'm gonna zoom into the map, dude, a little bit, this is gonna get even more interesting, because once we zoom into the actual location where the car was located, it was located literally at some dirt road. We do not have any Google Street View. The I guess we can look at the road from the angle of the main, I guess, highway road. So, dude, if you would drive there, that's Canby. And he literally had to drive on this road straight back to Marshall. For some reason, though, he was taking the dirt roads way down there. which made absolutely no sense. So for me, the realization of the dirt roads and why he was taking the dirt road made no sense, because once again, dude, this is Canby. You take this main road right here and you go back home to Marshall. It seems like he took the dirt roads. There's a good chance he actually took some of these lesser known, more rural roads. Eventually, his car got stuck here. So, the thing that jumped out to me is that map wise, it makes absolutely no sense. Do you see what I'm trying to say here, man?
Yeah, I definitely do. And I have heard this specific point called out by one show. And I also heard a rationale given that I agree with and I can relate to. Um, Fair warning, I'm not going to necessarily admit to doing illegal things in this show, um, but I may use wording and refer to hypothetical people that may in fact have been me in the past. So that means, so for this one case in point, what I thought of was, I mean, I remember when I was a college student and not 21 yet, and maybe was drinking with friends who also weren't legal and weren't supposed to be providing weren't supposed to be providing alcohol for people under 21. On the very few times that, let's say, somebody like me would have driven back home, which would have been almost never, because it's a dumb idea to be caught with any level of blood alcohol content when you're under 21. So that's the kind of, maybe that's the part. I don't know if it's the same in the part of Europe you're in, or across the EU, or whether those laws changed. But the US, because of like Mothers Against Drunk Driving and a lot of pressure and honestly a lot of deaths and accidents and ruined lives, they have like basically a zero tolerance for people under 21 in most states when it comes to alcohol, to the point where you can even get nailed for DUI or DWI, etc., for like cough syrup, because cough syrup often has enough, um, depending on your weight, could actually change your blood alcohol level to the point it's detectable. So the reason why I mention this is I remember how maybe somebody who was like 19, who had alcohol in their system and maybe was confident enough to drive back home, might find ways other than the main freeway system to try to get home, or or might also just try to drive real casual. So my joke was, if you're going to drive home drunk on the freeway, don't drive the limit in the right lane, in the right hand lane, because then you look all obvious. Drive like 70 in the second or third lane over, and then you kind of look like the rest of traffic, and assuming you can hold it together, you're not going to stick out. So that's what I wonder, if he was kind of, maybe this is the beginning of how this all unraveled for him that evening, was that he was so self-conscious about trying to either avoid law enforcement and take these little side routes and maybe kind of make this weird indirect, that's one idea. One idea is maybe he was taking an indirect route to try to escape law enforcement. So okay,
Yeah.
I'm just going to leave that there. That was my first idea about that point.
No, that's exactly what I heard as well, that apparently he was trying to avoid law enforcement because he apparently already had a DUI, at least from one podcast before. I heard that the hosts mentioned that he had a DUI already, and
Oh wow!
yeah, yeah, yeah.
If I could just interject, I mean, I'm amazed he even still had his license, because, I mean, it's really bad. I when I was his age, I knew a kid who the same, like a dude same age, right? Same age. He like here in my area, he was on the freeway. He had some drinks. He flipped the truck accidentally, making a hard right from one freeway to another, and lost his license until his 20s.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
totally.
that's how serious it can be. So I'm amazed he even got like a second, like a second chance. You
Yeah,
know?
I'm not really certain about this detail. I've just heard it on the podcast. I didn't really hear it mentioned elsewhere, so perhaps this is not even a real. Uh, take it for what it's worth, but apparently he had a DUI, but I cannot verify. The other thing is that we can't really say how much he was actually consuming of alcohol during the party. I've heard that his friends from the partying, they told the law enforcement or whatever that he wasn't super drunk. The only mention of the alcohol consumption is that apparently he took a whiskey shot. And I mean, we can't really say. It's really unknown how drunk he was. His parents, the people that had that night conversation with him as they were trying to find him in the night, they said to law enforcement and to the media that Brandon did not seem to be intoxicated, and he was aware of his surroundings and was even describing the area where he was, etc., etc. So it's interesting.
Well, if I can interject,
Of course.
I mean, he was describing the area. He was describing the wrong area around him. So that's what I kind of wonder. I think exactly that. I'll just focus on one thing you said, that his friend said he didn't seem that drunk. And maybe that's also one of the things part of this unraveling that night is potentially he was more inebriated. I mean, just looking at what happened for the rest of the night, potentially he was more inebriated than other people thought, even his parents apparently on the phone. And I would say that maybe that is not that unusual if he's like a quote unquote good drunk. You know what I mean? If he's somebody that just doesn't completely get like shit faced and red and stumbling and angry or silly or anything like that. If he's somebody that can take a couple drinks, but meanwhile those drinks are percolating. The whiskey shot worried me because the whiskey shots where you're like massively concentrating. Rogan had like a good guest about the topic of alcohol, and the guy was pretty interesting. He was saying that like historically humans have, in most cultures, have had alcohol and had access to certain strengths of alcohol, and with the Industrial Revolution, all of a sudden we had alcohol that was way stronger than our society had ever had. We're talking about hard alcohol with like 90 proof, etc., 100 proof and up. And the theory was that this potentially was more than we had adapted for. So I said that just because I kind of wonder if perhaps, I mean, at 19, how experienced a drinker could he be in the United States?
Yeah.
I don't know. He doesn't look like a big party animal, and maybe looks are deceiving. Maybe he's like, maybe he could have done a lot more. But,
yeah. Dude, sorry, man, for cutting you off a little bit there, but I think to keep this organized, because there are a few things I really want to get to. The first thing is I want to talk a little bit about how his car got stuck where it got stuck. This is where his car got stuck, and this is in the middle of a gravel road in the middle of nowhere, it seems like. And he was supposed to take this highway, and we can see this highway goes to his home. If he would have stayed on the highway. So do you have any ideas how he got to this particular road? Does anything jump out to you?
I mean, nothing particularly about, other than what I just said. I will say that, and I apologize, this is going to be coming back to me a lot, but I saw a lot of parallels going over the details. So, there's some people, there's a lot of people probably that have a pretty good sense of direction and are pretty good at navigating. And you know what I mean? Like you kind of memorize where the sun is and where landmarks are. And even if you're not using a GPS or a map, you sort of kind of know when you're going the right direction. And I would expect someone from the area would know. At night, like that can all go out the window. And I mean, I'm embarrassed to say that I've had at least one time where I got lost on the way home from work. Like it was a relatively new workplace, but like I think I went to go to a gas station in a different direction than I normally went. And at night, this is pre-GPS. I got completely turned around. I wandered around for like 50 minutes, dude, trying to find the friggin' way home. and I wasn't drunk. I mean, this was like right after work at like 6 at night or 7 at night. Um, and I remember calling my wife on the cell phone and trying to figure out where the hell I was. And it's, so I could see how somebody who's had some drinks, who maybe is doing this weird, like Dukes of Hazzard, like maneuvering, not doing big jumps, but like trying to avoid the law kind of maneuvering and weird detours. That's where I could see somebody thinking they drove more than they did. Because, yeah, to your point, like he thinks when he's talking to his parents, he basically thinks he's driven about 2 or 3 times as far as he has, right?
Yeah, that's a real good point, man. Because once again, let's say he said he believed he was within walking distance of the town of Lind. So I'm just gonna quickly do one more of my John Madden thingies here, dude. I feel it's fair to say, okay, maybe, dude, let's say this is walking distance of Lind, right? And he
What's
was
that? What's the radius of that circle? Would you say, or diameter? How far is it? Let's say, how far is it from that point to like the outside end of the circle? Because, yeah, I mean, he thought he was going to stroll up the road a couple
so
miles, which
like
is reasonable.
so like to 2.5 miles
Okay, wow.
diameter.
So really, the distance between where, I mean, it was like for him to actually make it to town, he would have had to walk about 3 to 5 miles, right? Depending on whether he
Well,
could go straight across.
the way I understood the timeline, right? He at first he calls a bunch of friends, they don't pick up, so he calls his parents and asks them if they could come pick him up, right? That's how it all unravels. And he waits near the within his car for a little while. He flashes his car lights, etc., etc. The parents cannot find him, whatever, right? So he says, while he's still at the location of his car, yo, I see lights. I believe that is Lind, and I'm within walking distance of Lind. Go towards Lind and we'll meet up there. So he was here, but he assumed he was somewhere here. Now, I have no idea how you do this.
This here maybe we'll actually like find a clue here for which way he could have gone. So I had two thoughts. Two thoughts when you describe this. Let's just put ourselves in his head for a second. Now, before we do, one detail that I heard that I have not seen confirmed. One investigator, separate from the police, suspected that Brandon had either lost or left his glasses someplace else this night. Either, at least from when he left the car. Maybe not when he was driving, but the theory was when he left the car that he had either misplaced or left his glasses in the car or near the car. Now, whether glasses were found in the car, that part I don't know. Perhaps the theory was also they were stolen later or misplaced or etc. But here's the thought. Okay, so his vision isn't, and he apparently needed the glasses. He wasn't like somebody that just needed them for reading. The glasses were pretty important to his actual visual functioning.
He was blind in one of his eyes, right?
Wow.
Yeah, he was blind in one of his eyes. Yeah,
wow.
he was.
Okay, so I mean, that's interesting. He's even kind of allowed to drive when he has he's already half blind and then limited vision.
Past DUI potentially. What is that all about?
These don't. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's just starting to sound a little bit like Mr. Magoo, and I don't mean to diminish him or put him down, but like these are all factors that are not working towards him successfully navigating that night. So, okay, what I thought was you have him diagrammed here on this is perfect. If he was looking down that highway and he got turned around, so if he thinks he's looking at Lind, he thinks he's probably like what, maybe either west or southwest of Lind. So he thinks he's looking maybe up the highway, because I think he forgot. I think he forgot what road he turned on. I think he's not looking at signs. I think he's a little bit confused and kind of maybe forgot what kind of maneuvering he's done. So he's sort of like, sometimes when people are are drunk, they start to revert to weird. I mean, I've done this when I've been inebriated or otherwise encumbered by narcotics. Kind of get stuck in a thought that like isn't even relevant anymore, and you kind of other people have to remind you, no, like we already did that other thing, right? So like I'm sure we've all dealt with annoying drunks who keep repeating a thing and can't be dispelled of that notion. I think that honestly, some variation of that was going on this night because when we talk about the conversation with the parents and that not just one phone call, the series of phone calls, I don't think that there was a such a friendly series of phone calls and conversations as one might initially think when you hear the description of the case, sort of the thumbnail version. So, okay, he's looking down the road. He thinks his directions are messed up. Like he's not looking at the stars. There's no sun to sort of guide his direction. Presumably, there's no GPS for him at this point because he clearly wasn't using it. And I don't think this is even like before most smartphones. So, okay, he's looking down the road. He sees a bunch of lights, but what I'm saying is, look how close he would have to be to Lind for where he thought he was. He was seeing lights, and he said, "Well, the distance they are and the scale of the lights, that must be Lind." Because if it was like another town, the town up the road, the town he was supposed to be in, going home to, the lights would be bigger. But he's not realizing that he's like 3 or 4 times as far away from the place he's looking at as, I mean, his perspective's off. So that was one theory, is that he thinks he's looking at that town because his sense of scale is all distorted by it being nighttime and him looking at things from maybe an unfamiliar angle and getting turned around. That was one theory. Now, the other theory is, well, what if he did have a sense of direction right? Is there anything to the northeast of where his car was found? So let's just use that as this, that's where he's in his car, signaling with his lights to mommy and daddy, who, in reality are nowhere near him. Could he have potentially seen something even further off in the distance? Like, what is that little kind of, from his car? No, you were in the right track. What is that one little town up there? So keep going up with your arrow. Go up and to the right. Sounds like JFK. Up and to the right. Up.
Clarkfield?
What is that little place? I'm like, could he have been looking at something like that and just, I mean, I don't know what could be so bright in that little cluster of whatever there. I just wonder if there was something to the north and west, and then, by the way, that would be a clue for where to look, right? Because maybe everybody's so busy looking at highways and roads and ditches and rivers that they never consider, well, what if he had his sense of direction correct? He just had his sense of like how far he traveled, because once again, I think anybody that takes cannabis will tell you that time is your perception of time is drastically affected under cannabis and many other drugs. So yeah.
Just looking at the map, I also had another idea. Perhaps, for instance, if he was thinking that he was close to this is his car. Now, law enforcement, I want to remind everyone, said that from the location where his car was found, during the night you can see lights coming from the Taunton Cooperative grain elevator, which is here. So if his car is here, he could have thought that this is Lind. So if this is Lind, then he could, if this was Lind to him, he could have envisioned himself being, and this is Lind, somewhere here. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. So if he's somewhere here in his mind and he thinks this is Lind, he's, I'm gonna walk towards this. Now, how would this make sense? Well, perhaps he mixed up the highways. This is the main highway that he was supposed to take to get back home. Perhaps he accidentally took this highway, because there's a big road here as well. Perhaps he took this road somewhere. Unrealizing that he took the wrong highway, he started driving down eventually, because he realized, oh crap, I'm going the wrong direction. Now he's here, but since, it's nighttime and He doesn't really know how long he's been driving. There's no GPS or whatever. He may think he may have driven south for way too long. So in his head, he might think he's already somewhere here. Now, he's still at the car. He sees the red lights coming from the Townton Cooperative elevator. He may believe that he's seeing Lind. He thinks he's gonna walk towards it, and he's gonna reach his parents. The parents also drive towards Lind. Now, obviously, the parents don't find him at Lind because he's not there, right? They report him to Lind police the following morning. Now, this is very important. Guys, like, take a screenshot of this map, like, do something. I know this is very map heavy, but this is gonna, dude, this is gonna be very important for everyone to, like, remember this real quick. And perhaps even, damn it, I can't even do a, wait, can I do a, damn, I want to do, like, I want to see if I can do a, I think I did a print screen, maybe, or whatever. Now, let's zoom in, let's zoom in, let's zoom in, let's zoom in, let's zoom in. So, in this perspective, right, this is him here. He thinks this is Lind. He goes there towards Lind. He runs into the yellow Medicine River. He's like, what the hell is this? This river should not be there. He starts walking west, northwest, where the dogs found his trace. He could have tried to cross it or accidentally jumped into it, shouted, "Oh shit," and potentially drowned somewhere here. And he could have gotten out of the water and died of hypothermia. It was around 40 Fahrenheit, which is 4 degrees Celsius. It was very cold. He could have died of hypothermia somewhere here shortly afterwards. So what is your thought about this play-by-play? You know, I mean, that's my idea.
I really like it. I mean, when you were describing, especially the premise that he took the wrong road initially, makes a lot of sense. And that maybe even better explains, aside from the, like, you know, avoiding the law explanation for why he was on these weird roads, why he was there, because that makes sense. I mean, the one you showed me, the one you showed initially, it isn't even that many degrees off of the other highway. You know what I mean? It's like there's like a 30-degree difference. So even if you thought you were going roughly the right direction, I mean, you kind of are, right? There's not really, I mean, you know what I mean? If you were flying an airplane, there's not that much difference between the way he went and the way he was supposed to go initially. I mean, obviously it gets worse and worse the longer he goes, which is the problem for anybody who's lost, is the more you go, the further you get away from where you were supposed to be in most cases. So, okay. That makes sense to me. Now, the one thing I was wondering, I think in the case it was mentioned that they'd also searched, or like so there was a tributary. As I understand, a tributary is like a stream that contributes to, like, a river, sort of the ancestor to the river. Where was that tributary that they mentioned?
Yes. I had to do a little bit of research. It's called Mud Creek. So and I have a good picture, dude. Let me find a good picture. Some maps here. This is the map that I liked a lot. Okay, this is Mud Creek right here at the very top. So it's north from where his car was found. As you can see, dude, this is where his car is found. You know, this is Mud Creek. This is the Yellow Medicine River. So I really like this picture. It's from Web Sleuth, and I guess it answers your question.
What a weird situation. Like you said, he would have found himself in, because yeah, like he would have suddenly run into a river he didn't expect, and then when he tries to go the opposite direction, or you know, he's in this weird parallel. He's got these parallel bodies of water, kind of framing him in there, and so wait. And you also said that the Yellow River was, what was going on? It was flooded or something? It was like 10 feet higher than normal?
No, it was 10 feet deep.
10 feet deep.
That
Oh,
night.
wow. Oh, and that changed later. So I wonder why it was 10 feet deep is really deep. I mean, that's like almost a fairly deep swimming pool.
That's very
Um,
deep. No, sorry, dude. 3 feet. 3 feet, which is
oh,
10 meters.
oh, wait,
3 feet. 3 feet deep. Uh, let me double check it, but I think
wait,
it
you
was.
said, you said 3 feet deep, which is 10 meters. I think you mean 10 feet deep, which is 3 meters.
No, no, dude. 3 feet deep. I think it was
Oh,
3 feet deep. Yeah, three.
oh, so only 1 meter. Okay, well then that changes it though. Gosh, and
Or
the voices.
maybe, dude. I
Yeah,
think
it's
I'm
okay.
watching
We'll
it.
do like I'm gonna spin it either way because I'm gonna say if it
No,
was
no,
three.
no, 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 dude. I'm gonna find it. It's in the notes. It's 10 feet deep, which is
Wow.
3 meters. 10 feet deep, which is 3 meters.
Yeah. So that's I mean okay. Well, I was gonna say even if it was a shallow river, the unsolved mysteries case that we did, that was so controversial, that was also a very shallow creek that seemed to still move the person's body some significant amount of distance. But 10 feet deep, I mean that's a powerful body of water. So I would fear for anybody trying to cross a 10-foot deep body of water. Um, uh, it's pretty wavy too. So yeah, and that's kind of going into the head right now for the final calculation for what happened. But now I can see why some of the initial let's say findings were that it was probably some kind of issue. And then like you said the cold night. I mean, already if you didn't have a jacket and stuff, it's already a pretty tough night to survive any kind of length of time. So the fact that you decided to go start walking was probably the least wise decision he made that entire night. To leave the car.
Yeah. Uh,
The
Sorry,
yeah.
man. Really quickly, just an idea. So, I really wanted to jump into it. So, let's say this is his car, right? And he believes this is Lind or whatever. This is a light source. This is the light source that he was trying to get to. I think there's a chance that maybe just in order to take a quicker route, he may have wanted to go through the fields, right? Not necessarily through the gravel road, which would have been a little bit longer, right? So he may have tried to go through the fields initially, and this is when he ran into the Yellow Medicine River. And he was describing to his parents that he was walking across fences and he heard water. So perhaps, just these details alone kind of definitely make me suspect that he was definitely talking about the Yellow Medicine River, because there is no any significant waterway here. And once again, just want to remind everyone that search dogs hit on a scent in this direction, more to this direction. So maybe he was going there, he ran into it, and then he tried to walk across it, got lost in the night. Oh shit. And drowned. You know what I mean? That's the sense that I'm getting here, man.
Yeah, I wonder, and maybe it's more obvious from that map you showed with the Mud Creek markings. If Mud Creek is a tributary, I just wonder which way that river is flowing. Is it showing that map? Maybe I'm just not seeing it. Maybe it's more obvious.
I don't think so. I don't
Yeah.
even see how it's such. Well, that's the thing, dude. Mud Creek and Yellow Medicine, they're like really big rivers, and they go
Oh,
like
okay.
they're like
So
they
who knows
go.
which way they go?
Yeah,
Yeah.
who knows? These are like small little branches. We're talking about like branches of the river. The river is kind of entangles. I think most of you know what I mean. Most of western Minnesota.
The one quick note before we continue on, the being lost and changing directions and course corrections and stuff. It reminds me of two things. It reminds me of what's it, Yuba County 5 a little bit, right? Because you got those weird kind of that weird detour that they take, remember, where you're like, why did they do that? But then it also reminds me of the Bermuda Triangle case we covered a long time ago now. The flight what's that
Something,
flight
yeah.
flight 15, whichever, you know what I mean, where it was the same, it was like the military version of that, but it was a group version. So I guess, you know what I mean, there's kind of no shame in being lost, because when you see that even trained aviators literally on a training flight with expert, subject matter experts, if they can get lost, even using like, what was then modern navigational tools, I'm sort of not surprised a drunk college kid who can barely see maybe got lost in the woods here, the fields. But like, what happened to him? So that's the other part that is kind of interesting with all these theories. Okay, so I think that probably, I mean, gosh, I think you probably addressed better than I've heard a lot of people do some of the reasons for why he would be in those fields or be adjacent to a river or even be in a situation where he might accidentally fall into a river.
Yeah.
But what about the phone? So the phone is the part that everybody's sort of like, well, what happened there, right? Because and once again, it's frustratingly, it's like right on the cut. You know what I mean? It's like yet another case where the person has a phone on them, right? They're even on the phone. They're doing it. They're doing something on the phone when they disappear, and there wasn't enough technology apparently then to get us more information to track the phone. It's kind of amazing, right?
Yeah. No, that's a good point, dude. I feel like we could definitely go through the other details, and the phone is actually one of the first other details that I still wanted to talk about. And there was a misconception that when Brandon said, "Oh shit," that the phone call ended. In fact, the phone call did not end. Brandon said, "Oh shit," and and he was silent. Okay, the parents tried calling to him, but they couldn't hear him say anything, so they hung up and tried to call again, but then he didn't pick up. But I don't think it went immediately to voicemail. I don't believe. I feel like the phone was still fully operational, just that Brandon wasn't picking up his phone anymore. The other interesting note about the phone call is that right after or before or during the time when Brandon said, "Oh shit," his father actually reported hearing some sort of a slipping, like something like that, something, but nothing like that would include foul play. So I personally don't think there was foul play in this case, because I feel like they would have heard foul play. And also it's pretty interesting to think that maybe if there was some sort of an accident where he slipped into the water, you would kind of assume that the parents would hear some sort of water splashing or something like that. But apparently they did not really report that. Once again, this is 2008, so we don't really know how good the quality of the phones were back then. But maybe maybe the phone would have picked up like the splashing of the water. Who really knows, right? You can't pretty much say this detail. But yeah, those are the interesting points that the father said he kind of slipped up. So I feel like the "oh shit" wasn't like someone grabbing him or some sort of a foul play happening. I feel like he would have disclosed that to his parents in some sort of a alerted way. But I think it was some sort of an accident, him slipping and potentially getting injured, either dying on the spot or something like that. His phone or his remains have never been uncovered, so we can't really know for sure. But apparently the phone only died a few days after the fact, so I'm thinking maybe there's a chance that maybe the battery was still alive for a few days. The battery died somewhere in the fields, and the phone has just never been located. You know what I mean? Maybe that's the case. So I don't know. You have any thoughts about the phone situation?
Yeah, and I maybe have too many, but I'll try to keep them brief. So, yeah, just alluded. So, just for what you said, yeah. I've even heard reports that even maybe like the parents could hear the water noises on the phone. Just the background noises, and that also during the call they could hear him slipping and kind of sliding around. Like his footing was not good during a good portion of this call. Sorry, his footing was not solid. Like he had been kind of slipping and sliding around, and it sounded like he was walking on surfaces that were not entirely steady. Which, like, we covered this in some other shows where you look at some of these places where there's no sidewalk, there's just a ditch on the side of the road. If you don't want to walk on the road and maybe get hit, you're maybe like, you've got maybe a foot width to walk on before you're falling down like a 4 or 5 foot ditch, rain ditch on the side of the road. So my thought around this specific thing was interesting because also in the account of the phone call, I don't think this was like a happy phone call. I think there was a lot of arguing going on about it. I think there were some recriminations. You can imagine as parents, they're probably not, Brandon's parents are probably not super happy to hear about automobile accident after drinking, after, all these things. And now they got to go find him. And then, if there has been any kind of prior charges or legal problems, well, that's like a whole other thing too. I mean, a DUI can cost you, what do they say these days? Getting a DUI, by the time you're done with court and fines and legal fees and stuff, you're out like maybe $10,000 in terms of like just overall impact in your life, in your wallet. So, it's a little bit of a calamity already, I can imagine. And as parents, on one hand, they're probably relieved that their kid hasn't been hurt yet, but they're also frustrated. And I'm getting just based on his actions, I'm betting he was acting in kind of a frustrated manner. Apparently, he also hung up on his mom. So like they got mad at each other, and he hung up a couple times. He probably could have also accidentally hung up, I guess, while he's stumbling around and trying to talk, and when you just hold your phone the wrong way, etc. But that part, I think sometimes maybe gets a little bit glossed over because, of course, nobody wants to think about that being the last conversation they have with their loved one. I also thought that was interesting, but understandable, that the parents said a lot of the things that you said, like they said, listen, we didn't hang up right away, because probably a billion people asked them, right? Probably everybody that ever heard this story said, well, what did you hang up right away? Or like you said, sometimes people imagine that it just went, oh shit, that the call died right after that, because that's a very dramatic thing. But no, it wasn't either of those. Some people speculated that because the phone, this is the important part, because the phone didn't die right away, they speculated that if he had fallen into a body of water, like immediately, that the phone would have hit the water and almost immediately died, and that the battery wouldn't have lasted a couple of days later. Now, this is like another unfortunate part where my life coincides with reality with this case. In the space of about a month, I had 2 different phones underwater. One died. One, I jumped into a pool. I didn't know it was in my pocket. I forgot. I swam a lap. The phone was toast. The other one, the replacement phone, was in front of me, not intentionally, underwater for a good couple of minutes, right in front of my face, before I realized this thing had leaked water into this massive puddle, and there was my brand new phone staring at me 2 or 3 inches underwater. And it worked fine, worked for 7 years or something ridiculous like that. Or 6 years. So this is the way of saying I don't put a lot of stock into like just because a phone hits water, it immediately is going to do predictable things. Phones do all kinds of weird things. Electronics do all kinds of weird things in water, and we should be grateful that they don't always break 100% of the time, and they don't. Sometimes they do come back. Okay. So that was just, the phone is often used as sort of an indexing tool by other people that look at this case, is like, this is why this thing happened, or that thing definitely didn't happen. Do you know what I mean? That's why I went so hard on this. I was like, this is something that a lot of people put a lot of significance in, and it should be, right? Because just like the Delphi case, I mean, it's the best piece of evidence we have for what was going on, and it also kind of shows us that at least up until the point where he says he crashed the car, whether it's the same place his car was found or not, right? Because I guess that's always a possibility, that someone could have found his car and moved it, or that he could have been accosted later, let's say, whatever reason.
I don't think that's a possibility, because it was searched, right? And there was nothing suspicious found. So.
And nothing seemed weird other than the car. One thing that was weird was the car was apparently all opened up. like all the doors were open.
Yeah.
That was one reporter I ran into, and I was like, well, what was that about? Do you think? Let me just let's pause on that for a second. What would be the explanation for that?
Yeah, that's bizarre to me. Perhaps like some of the locals, someone was driving past, you know what I mean? Locals, dirt road, locals, they see abandoned car, they investigate, drive away, you know?
Yeah, that actually sounds pretty reasonable. I mean, I was gonna say if it was if he had fallen into the let's say he was stumbling around on the phone, he falls into the river, but he dropped his phone like on the shore. You fall into the river, you're not really looking for your phone anymore, right? Because you're freezing at that point and maybe gonna die, or probably gonna die if someone doesn't find you right away. Maybe he wanders back to the car, gets in it, he's still freezing. He goes into hyperthermia, and he has the paradoxical undressing thing going on. Now there's big holes in my theory, but obviously, but the theory would be he gets hot, right? So like when you have hyperthermia, which means dying if your body temperature is too low. One of the weird things that happens to people right before they freeze to death, often, is that their mind tricks them into taking off all their clothes because their mind makes them think that they're hot. And this has been found across time during wars, etc. So the whole of my theory is, well, like we should have found his naked body pretty close to the car, you would think, right? With his clothes everywhere, but that's not what we find. So once again, it's almost like this is a weird red herring of a clue, but I don't know what to make of it. I guess now that I talk it through,
I feel like it's a red
Eileen,
herring.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I feel like the car doors being open, it's a red herring. I don't think it really, you know what I mean, gives us all that much to go on about. But dude, I have these pictures from the search, and this is from the official search, okay, of Brandon Swanson, not Lawson, right? Yeah, Brandon Swanson. Uh, and look, dude, look how steep this this thing is, yo. I could definitely see Brandon like falling off of a steep little hill like that, you know what I mean? Phone gets somewhere here. He stumbles into the water right here.
I agree, and then when I mean it's a very severe. It's not a good slope at all to access a river. It's one that, like you said, you would almost immediately fall into the river from it, and then and if it's 10 feet deep at any point of like or anywhere close to that where you're showing, because the river isn't actually that wide. The river actually looks like you could maybe do a long jump across it if you were a really tall person or an athlete, but for it to be that deep or anywhere near that deep in a river this thin suggests a pretty fast moving body of water. If you fall, you know what I mean? That's like a thick pipe that's moving a lot of water if it was a pipe. So here's my question. When you fall down something like that, do you hold on to your phone, or is your reflex to let go of the phone and try to stop yourself from falling into the river?
Oh, you let go of the phone, I would say. And
Yeah.
another thing I want to add is that the search dogs, right? They picked up his, well, I don't know whose, right? But they picked up a scent next to the Yellow Medicine River, but they also picked up the scent on the other side of the river, and they continued going and following along into the fields. So there's also a speculation that maybe he did fall into the river, but then he got out of the river and he died of hypothermia shortly after, somewhere in the fields, and his body has never been found yet, you know what I mean? And then his body is somewhere here, his body is somewhere here.
So I heard a couple of other interesting and I think a little bit unique explanations for that I think match this part of the story. Because the question is, where's the body, right? Like we have all these other things that are pretty reasonable for what happened to him, and then the question is, well, like where did he go? And this is a common question for a lot of our episodes, and we have a lot of the same common factors: bodies of water, drinking, navigating at night, car accident, um, mixed up communications and things like that. So I mean, in terms of like like what could have happened to his body, two things that were suggested that I thought were interesting. One was that he could have potentially fallen down an unmarked like well or cistern, and like these things definitely exist, and it does actually happen. I think probably almost certainly more than we think or know, because probably there's some amount of people that fall down these things and are never found. But I remember when I was a kid, I remember a little girl falling down a hole like that. I forget how they found her. They found her like I think right away, because it was like her own backyard, and maybe the parents were on their guard. But this little girl fell way the hell down this hole, and it was one of those holes that like you wouldn't even they didn't even know it was there. You know what I mean? Like they're properties and things where these holes were dug a long time ago and maybe halfway covered up, or the board that covered it up rotted away, and now there's a hole that is just wide enough for a human being to fall straight down, you know what I mean, and then never be heard from again, and for it to be such a low profile thing that it would be really hard to even find it, unless you knew what you were looking for. Does
Yeah,
that make sense?
yeah, I heard about that theory. It was proposed. It's possible, you know what I mean? I don't have the statistics of how many of those holes are in the vicinity, but I mean, everything's possible, right? I would say that's kind of unlikely, because what are the chances that he accidentally stepped into it? I mean, there should be like a
Yeah.
minefield of these things. If, like, just doing the percentages, like, I just don't see it, because he was walking across fences, water, the dogs picked up his scent next to the water. I'm still looking at the water, dude.
It would be bad luck, right? I mean, it would be
I feel like
exceptionally
let
bad
me
luck.
let me put it this way.
Yeah.
I feel like the chances of him getting like inside into dropping into a hole are the same as his chances of running into a serial killer in the middle of Minnesotan farm fields in the middle of the night. You know what I mean? Like, the chances are very slim. I feel like yeah, slim. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we need to investigate like what's the area like, but just the fact that he was describing the water, the dogs picking up the water. You know what I mean? I mean, sure, there's no evidence, but
I mean, don't get me wrong. I agree with you. I agree with you that it's probably didn't happen. I could see at least it being it fits a couple parts in the story where I could see him going in the water, freezing to death, stumbling around, and then, oh my gosh, of all things, like, falls down this hole, and then he's gone.
and
Okay,
then
but
and then let's also add like a serial killer to that. So jumps into the yellow medicine river, comes out, runs into a serial killer. The
he
serial
chases
killer
him into a well.
chasing him into a well. Yeah, yeah. I think that's what happened.
Okay, so wait, all jokes aside, then let me switch it up. Let me say, how about this theory? And this was also an interesting one, and I'll spin a little bit. What if he goes? Okay, so everything's same story. Wandering around, slides down the embankment into the river, dropped his phone on the way, so the phone's just sitting there on the shore, not wet at all, at least for not for the period when it was still on. Okay, and then he goes in the river. He pulls himself out of the river, freezing cold, somewhere down where the dogs follow some human's path back out of the river, and then he goes into these fields. So what happens to him in the field? So one idea was that either it was that his body was potentially destroyed by farming equipment, because these are farm fields around there, and a lot of this farm equipment, kind of the dirty secret of industrialized farming, is the big farming combines and things like that, the tractors and everything that we see that grow all the food we need to survive, kills a lot of animals in the process. It's not intentional. It's just that there's a lot of animals living in fields, squirrels and rabbits and gophers and moles. If you ever saw Secret and Nim, you know what I'm talking about. There's a whole ecosystem living in those fields, and sometimes parasitizing it, um, and potentially his body maybe was laying in a field like in Superman 3, and here comes the combine, and it just crunches up that body and just completely shreds it in a way that if a forensic investigator didn't get to it promptly and no DNA evidence was collected, and there aren't enough bone fragments for whatever reason, um, to run tests on later. Maybe there are, but just they're not obvious because everything's been ground into like soil at this point. Maybe somebody. So then the theory is, well, would a farmer notice that? Maybe, and then would that person say anything about it? So could they just kind of have their plausible deniability? My tractor shreds living things all the time. Why would I think that's a body? And they sort of see something they kind of or maybe they do realize what they've done accidentally, and they're like, what, I just don't even need any of this hassle. I've got to get these crops planted or crops collected or whatever it is, on time. I've got deadlines to hit, grain to sell. This kid's already dead, sorry, but like me saying something isn't going to bring him back. Now, of course, somebody saying something would, of course, bring comfort to the loved ones of this person, but it may not outweigh that person's kind of selfish desires or motives.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was one of the ones I heard. I thought that was kind of interesting theory.
I see the point there. I heard about it, that a combine accidentally or for whatever reason drove over the body and shredded it into pieces. Sure, I think that's a possibility as well. I'm not gonna say that it's not. And I'm looking at other details here, dude, from the notes. I just want to quickly run over to see if I have missed anything, because we addressed a few of the interesting points I personally wanted to address. It um, does seem like we did cover pretty much everything I wanted to cover in terms of like on my end from the details. Are we missing anything on your end, dude?
No, I mean, I guess other than I think we've hit a lot of the high points that I was thinking about, and yeah, I mean, I will just point out, unfortunately, um, the genesis for this whole thing seems to have been probably partying, and I guess I mean, if there's one thing that Brandon could have done different, or I would suggest, let's say, to anybody listening, but especially young people, who might be about to finish their first year of college or a tough year of college, maybe try to sleep over if you're going to drink or party that night. It's probably not worth trying to do what Brandon unfortunately did that night. So, with that being said, I mean, do you think it's time to jump into the kind
Theories,
of,
right?
the recap, the
Of
theories?
course, man, of course. So, for the theories, right? I think we have a few here, and as I've said, I've mentioned, we have the accident theory, we have the mental breakdown theory. I think it's self-explanatory to some extent. We have the suicide theory, which doesn't make any sense, but it's a theory. We also have a homicide theory as well. Also, we have the accidental hit and run theory, that maybe someone hit him over the road, and this, I mean, in the fields there are, I think, infinite amount of scenarios that could play out. I think personally for me, after analyzing the case and doing my like investigation, looking at the maps, really thinking about it, I think he probably, unfortunately, it was an accidental death. I would lean towards an accidental death. If I had to bet, he probably did slip somewhere and slipped into one of the waterways. I mean, there's probably a reason why law enforcement and investigators believe that this happened. They spend more energy and time than us into researching this case. We just did like a few days of research, and they did entire search parties, and they questioned the parents and did their investigation. They're leading towards the accidental drowning scenario, or maybe perhaps drowning, or not drowning, accidentally slipping into the water and then later on dying by hypothermia. And I do agree that that's the case. The only I think thing that really jumped out to me is why the hell did he think he was close to Lind? And if he thought that he was close to Lind, then that means he had to be super confused and he had no idea where he was walking. So I think there's a chance that he accidentally just walked took a wrong step, slipped into the water, um, died. I will say, in to be the devil's advocate for this theory, the fact that nothing was heard by the parents on the phone, they did not hear any water or splashing or anything like that. That's kind of suspicious to me. But I mean, it could be the case that maybe he kind of slipped somewhere. He didn't necessarily slip into the water per se. Maybe just the phone, like, got somehow like detached from his hand or something like that. Anyways, I'm going off, and this probably doesn't make any more sense. So I'm just gonna leave it at. I think he drowned. Not, yeah, probably drowned. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that.
No, I think that's a good summary. I'll say on my side, just in case anybody says, "Oh, you guys didn't cover the crime angle enough." I mean, we already mentioned VICAP at the beginning of the episode that there's always been that theory that he was a victim of violent crime. It doesn't really make sense to me. Like, I don't really see what he had to steal at that point. I don't see why they would do it, though. Criminals do stupid things for no reason, destructive things for no reason, for sure. But to do so without some kind of obvious signs of struggle or, anything left behind that would point that direction seems a little weird. I think, to your point, even after covering all the other scenarios where, even in terms of like his scent coming out of the river, I do wonder if something could have washed up that some other animal um, carried outside of the river, and that got mistaken for being like a live person instead of something from a live person. I will say that from my point of view, I'm guessing he was swept into the river, and given the depth and I'm guessing the velocity of the water in that river, I think it's possible, much like we see the major river that's in my neck of the woods, kind of in California, called the Kern River, that kills people every year. I mentioned this too many times. They pull once when the like spring ends and summer comes and the river level goes down, or sometimes the river actually dries up. They find cars and like people that have been stuck down there, wedged under rocks, trapped in cars. The river will do unpredictable things, and while all things probably come out the other end of that river eventually, I could imagine a body being stuck down there for some period of time that by the time it does get dislodged and disintegrates and kind of turns into its constituent parts, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, it is no longer recognizable and maybe no longer even testable. Okay, so that's I'm saying 95% that's what happened.
That he like drowned alongside the water.
Yeah, accidental fell in the river. Just completely matching kind of the vanilla version of the accidental death hypothesis that we put forward today.
Yeah. Oh yeah, dude. I would agree. That's definitely like how I'm thinking about this case. But we'll see. We'll see. Some audience members, they always give us a good run for our money. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
They give better explanations. So we'll see. Talking about that, dude. Anything you want to mention to the audience before we sign out?
Yeah, just thank you so much for all the great comments. And like you said, I mean, I saw some really great theories this week across multiple cases, and both from new fans of the show, as well as those that have been with us since we started. And we definitely know who those people are. So thank you.
Definitely, guys. Fun show. We'll catch you on the next week's episode, guys, and I hope the rest of your week will be fun. Please stay safe. We'll see you on the next episode. See ya, boys and girls.